The explosive interest in All Tomorrows hasn't gone unnoticed. M Kosemen himself is well aware of its newfound success and is working on a new All Tomorrows book as we speak. Whether or not it'll come out before or after the other book he's been writing, Snyad, I don't know, but it is coming. So what is this new All Tomorrows story about? Well, he wrote himself into a bit of a corner with the original, something we'll talk about in this video in the future. He covered everything from today to a few 100 million years into the future. Of course, if you're subscribed to the channel, we already know what actually happened to humanity and know their story isn't over. But assuming we ignore that theory today, yeah, there's not much to cover beyond where All Tomorrows ends. There's not great material for stories in the middle of All Tomorrows either. He kind of kills off everything from the most interesting period of time, something else we'll be talking about. So maybe you're thinking it must be a prequel instead. Well, unfortunately, he's already written something called All Yesterdays, which kind of pulls out the gunpowder of that idea too. All this is to say is All Tomorrows 2 is actually more of an All Tomorrows 2.0. It's not a new story, he's just fixing the original story. So what we're talking about in today's video is discussing what Kosemen will probably, or at least hopefully, fix in his All Tomorrows rewrite. Because yeah, as amazing as it is, it does have some pretty big problems as well. If the story was casual sci-fi like Star Wars, the mistakes we're going to talk about would seem minor and nitpicky, but All Tomorrows is hard sci-fi. He put a lot of work trying to make it as realistic as possible. As such, we need to apply a higher level of scrutiny to it. Fortunately, I'm an amateur writer myself and have nearly 14 years of world-building experience. Paired with a good understanding of science and futurism, I think I have a good chance of accurately determining what Kosemen might be changing in his new All Tomorrows. Let's dig in. We went into our first issue very quickly. Humanity chooses to wait till Mars was fully terraformed before actually setting foot on it. Like, no, not simply not colonizing it. Literally not even a scientific landing by astronauts. Right now, NASA wants to have manned landings in the 2030s. Maybe they won't make that deadline. Even still, it's not thousands of years away. Maybe at most 100. Hell, even private companies will probably pull it off in that amount of time. There's just no way we would wait for it to be fully terraformed first before going there. I could get into how it also makes more sense to terraform Venus first. Surprisingly, despite Venus being a hellish toxic inferno and Mars being a cold desert, turns out it's easier to terraform Venus. If you want to learn more about why this is the case, I highly recommend checking out Isaac Arthur's video on terraforming Venus. Actually, I recommend checking out his channel in general. It covers a lot of the subjects we'll be talking about today when it comes to realistic space science. Anyway, I won't put Venus up against Kosemen here. Even though it might be easier to terraform, it doesn't really have the same public interest that Mars does. Mars also is the one that we can land and walk on right now, which goes a long way in popular appeal. The point stands though, we'll walk on Mars before we terraform it. The Martian Americans. I'm gonna be real here, this is kind of a cringy name. Hey, it's okay to say it. Kosemen himself says some things in All Tomorrow are cringe. Also on the previous page, he said that Earth is united under one government. I guess that could be America, but it sounds more like a united Earth government like in Star Trek, which would make it weird to call yourselves Americans when you're a multinational project. As for the Earth-Mars conflict, I don't see too much of a problem here. There would be if it wasn't properly explained, because it wouldn't really be likely in reality due to the codependence of the two planets. But he specifically brings up a culture of wanting to revolt, permeating all media on Mars. And because he did terraform it before colonizing it, assumedly Mars wouldn't be reliant on Earth for food, so this portion is in the clear. The conclusion of the conflict is a little bit more sus. Yes, an apocalyptic number of people died in a conflict like nothing we've ever seen before, but I'm not convinced it would really be enough to make people think that genetically modifying everyone into a new, better race is okay. Not everyone, at least. I think the biggest proof of this is just how people have reacted to COVID. If people won't submit to simple immunizations, will they really submit to full genetic modification? Not likely, but at least he does provide an excuse for it. Okay, now this one is definitely a nitpick, but he says, soon Sol is too small to contain humanity. Not true. Again, I recommend watching Isaac Arthur's videos on Matroska worlds and star skimming. The amount of people you can fit in a single system can actually compete with how many you can fit in the entire galaxy with traditional colonization. However, he might not mean literally here, and more that humanity wanted to start exploring the stars. Now, the expansion of the star people is fraught with problems. It's the part where Kosemen really tries to double down on the realism of All Tomorrows by dismissing FTL travel. All good there. However, last chapter with colonizing Mars, he described fusion rockets, a near-future propulsion drive scientists expect will have in not too long. Also a good call by Kosemen. He describes their speed as mere percentages of light. Again, I point you to SFIA for fusion drive technology. Ballpark low, a fusion drive would hit 5% the speed of light with a peak efficiency of 20 for a really good one. Given it's been hundreds if not thousands of years since it had been developed in this point of the story, and remember, the smart people are much smarter than regular humans, it's unlikely they're still crawling around at 5% the speed of light still. They must have at least reached 10% by now. There's a few ways to colonize the galaxy at sublight. The one that Kosemen goes with is the Cedar ship, where an autonomous robotic spacecraft goes to the stars and clones humans from genetic material on board. He says generation ships are prone to break down or revolt, which may be fair, but this also means immortality hasn't been figured out. You might think that it's crazy to say that that's a near-future tech, but it actually is expected to be something we can look forward to into the future, not too long from now either. We also have the option of sleeper ships, where people are cryogenically frozen, or a similar state to that and then waking up at the destination. Likely though, technologies that open the door to that would also lead to the technology for immortality. Somehow the Star People have discovered none of this near-future technology. All that said, Cedar ships are still valid. The issue, though, is one, because it's all robotic, acceleration and g-forces aren't a concern like when people are on board, which means you can get to destinations even faster. The second problem is that he's saying a staggering 50% of these missions fail to the Star People falling in love with the machines that create them. I can see it happening a few times, but 50-50? That's staggering, especially for a species of humans who are supposed to be superior in every way, including intellectually. There's no real problems with the Summer of Man as far as I can tell. The only problem here is some mixed messaging of how long this period of time is and how far they expand, which causes some issues later, which we'll get into. Also, as far as I can tell, there's no issues with the chapter of an early warning from my perspective. The Q, though, compound the issue of the Summer of Man, making it unclear just how far humanity expanded. They're referred to as nomads that go from galaxy arm to galaxy arm. That would seem to reinforce that humans only expanded to the Orion arm, our arm of the galaxy. For example, at this point, the Q are referred to as rulers of the galaxy. Maybe they are now, but they were also just called nomads. Moreover, when they leave, it's described as they left behind 1,000 worlds, which is almost nothing compared to the worlds that would be in the galaxy. Even just compared to the amount of worlds in our spiral arm, this would be very few. We're finally to the bulk of all tomorrows, the myriad descendants of humanity, and let's face it, if I go through all of them in the amount of detail I just went through the first part of the story, we'll be here for hours. I'm just going to hit the main problems I spotted and the various post-human species that I expect may get fixed. Let's start with everyone's favorite meme race from all tomorrows, the Colonials. Don't get me wrong, their fate is perhaps the most horrifying of all humans. Imagine having sentience but being trapped in a body that's just a brick of flesh with an eye. That's just horrifying. The problem is this punishment would only be bad for the first Colonials, the existing population that fought the Q. For one, it's not even specified if the Q can transform existing beings or if they can only build new ones. If they can only make new ones, this fate is not so bad. Why? Sentience without knowledge, without language, without something to compare your existence to. It would be impossible to know that your fate is so terrible without any way to know concepts. You just exist. It's sort of the ultimate case of ignorance is bliss, except that you're literally ignorant of anything. So the only way for this fate to be true punishment requires that the Q can transform existing life forms. Then, that they can genetically modify immortality into them, and that the way that the Colonials reproduce is by splitting off perfect clones that have all their collected memories and knowledge. All of that should actually be possible for the godlike Q, but Kosemen should write that down if that is the case. Let's move on to everyone's favorite flat boys, the Lopsiders. Their issue isn't with their biology as far as I know. The real problem is that the world's staggering 36 times Earth's gravity. For one, I'm not sure that a rocky planet can even get this big. The biggest rocky exoplanet we've seen so far is BD 2059-4b, which probably has something like 16 times Earth gravity, so 36 is a pretty big jump. We can't discount that maybe they can exist though, so let's ignore that for now and get on with the real issue. The Lopsiders will never become spacefaring. Rockets on Earth alone, dealing with a mere 1g of gravity, have to be 85 to 95% fuel to payload ratio to get into space. For 36g, I'm not even sure how to start calculating it, but here's a handy chart I found. Yeah, in just 6 times Earth's gravity, the first stage alone would require 40 million F-1 rocket engines, the engines that the Saturn rocket had that we can't even build anymore. And this is nothing to the almost infinite amount of fuel that they'd have to expend. Yes, we can assume that they can make better engines, but this is exponentially growing scale. Even at just 10 times Earth's gravity closes in on the truly impossible. There's other ways to get to space, yeah, but they all suffer from the immense gravity too. Space elevator? The higher gravity a planet has, the harder it is to make tall buildings stable. Even plans here on Earth to build a space elevator are based on lowering a cable from space to avoid that problem. And a space elevator on Earth is even reliant on a technology called graphene, which we can't produce in very big quantities right now. And I'm not even sure if graphene would be strong enough for a planet of this high gravity. And just as discussed, Lopsiders can't get a rocket out to do that to begin with. Worse, geostationary orbit for them is probably way farther out for them than it is for us. Mass drivers are maybe their only hope, but they have to deal with the same escape velocity problems as anything else. This isn't even getting into the fact that our atmosphere is probably very dense because of all this gravity too, which would make air drag even worse just to add to the problem. Yeah, sorry Lopsiders, you're not getting anywhere. It's time to deal with the Titan in the room. Asteromorph, spacers, and their farts. Hurley Kosemen, just why? Unlike all the other races, the spacers and Asteromorphs have all their technology intact. Not only that, but there's no natural selection going on, unlike the humans that have been reduced to animals. The only way they can change is by genetically modifying themselves, which is fine, but choosing to change themselves to move by farting? When they would definitely have super advanced jetpacks by this point? Without gravity, jetpacks won't even have to be very big, heavy, or cumbersome. So yeah, Kosemen, let's get rid of this weird meme, please. There are probably more issues with the post-humans to look at, but like I've said, we'll be here a long time. Let's move on. The Second Human Empire. Sorry, Kosemen, there's no way in hell that the humans would never meet in person. This is the big one I've been hinting at, by the way. We've already discussed with the Star People the fusion drive, a near-future engine that can reach 5 to 20% the speed of light. There's nothing to say that the post-humans wouldn't figure it out too. Regular humans figured out how to do it well before upgrading into Star People, and they didn't have the 80 million years that these post-humans have to figure it out. This is where the lack of clarity on just how big the first human empire was causes us issues. It matters a lot if post-humans are all in the Orion Arm or all over the galaxy. You might say, well, the Q just spread them out. But the story doesn't say that. It says they settled down for 40 million years, but just in the arm? They were moving arm to arm before, so I'm not sure why it wouldn't be only the arm. But there's also no reason for them to not take over the whole galaxy in the meantime. At the same time, though, the Q also seemed to be angry at humans for wrecking the natural ecologies of worlds, so it'd be a little weird for the Q to spread humans out to places that humans already hadn't been. All this is to say that in the All Tomorrow's rewrite, Kosemen should really give us some hard time and size estimates in the next book. Anyway, to prove a point, let's assume the worst case scenario. There are 11 post-human races in the Second Human Empire, with bug-facers being a late entry and Saurosapiens being non-human. We ignore the Asteromorphs since they're hiding. The Gravital should be expanded like anyone else though, so we'll count them as number 12. Meanwhile, the galaxy, depending on how you count the arms, has 8. Let's try to be as generous as possible. One of them is fractured from the base of the arm, so we'll call that 9. We'll also stick someone in the center of the galaxy for a 10th position. Let's go with the Gravitals, since they can endure higher radiation better anyway, and being at the center of the galaxy would perhaps contribute to their attitude issues. Even still, some races will have to share a galactic arm. Time to do some math. The Milky Way galaxy is roughly 100,000 light years in diameter. To keep the math simple, let's assume that one of the post-humans has a fairly average 10% the speed of light fusion drive. 10 times 100,000, 1 million years to get from one end of the galaxy to the other. That's the complete diameter too. Remember, there's 11 post-humans spread across the galaxy. You would definitely run into someone sooner. Even if we assume a terrible 5% the speed of light engine, that makes it a 2 million year trip. Sure, it's too long for a lifetime, but remember sleeper ships and seeder ships. And also that they get a full 80 million years to figure out the immortality issue, which again is thought to be not so far off tech, just like the fusion drive. Even if we discount a fusion drive as a technology, solar sails are something we can build right now, and they can also achieve speeds similar to these if they're powered by lasers. Remember how the Milky Way has 8 arms? Well, we can turn our circle into an octagon and put a post-human at each vertex. They've been talking after all. Why fly across the galaxy when you can meet someone that's closer? The distance between these points comes out to roughly 40,000 light years. That'll take just a mere 400,000 years at 10% the speed of light. And don't forget that they could also just meet in the middle, which would make it a mere 200,000 year trip. And all of this is assuming the worst case scenario of how far apart they can be. Move any of these points and suddenly some nations are closer than others, and the book does clearly state that they are not spread evenly. Beyond this point of the story, it gets hard to nitpick issues, mainly because at this point Kosemen does away with the hard science and moves more into full-on sci-fi. It's possible that the Gravitals, by the time of their invasion, had FTL drive. He doesn't directly say so, but he does refer to interstellar jumps. And it also only took them 10,000 years to destroy every race in the entire galaxy. Even if we assume that they have a perfect 30% the speed of light fusion drive and don't care about acceleration g-forces at all, it'd be hard for them to pull this off quickly without FTL. All doubt is erased by the asteromorph gods at the end of the story, though. They've linked the galaxy with wormholes, and there's mention of building ships with hyperdrive as well. So there's not so much point in arguing what they can do at this point. Other than, man, this fart fetish is going too far. Seriously, these beings that are indistinguishable from gods are still farting to get around. It's time to stop. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Get your fanfictions ready because all your ships are now valid. There's no way the post-humans don't get to meet. Well, with the exclusion of the lopsiders, asymmetric people. Sorry guys, you're not going anywhere. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm not sure how many more of these all tomorrow's theories I can come up with. Honestly, I probably should have made each point here its own video, but oh well. Not all of us can take half a page of text per species and make a 10-minute video about it. I do still plan to make videos in this format once a month though, so if you'd like to catch those, consider subscribing. It's funny, before my last All Tomorrow's video, my views to subscriber ratio was like 40%, now it's 2%. Keep the conversation going in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.